The city was a labyrinth of secrets, shrouded in a perpetual gloom. Every corner seemed to whisper tales of forgotten times, and every shadow held a mystery waiting to be uncovered. A thick blanket of fog, the color of steel, hung low, clinging to the Gothic architecture like a ghostly shroud. The mist seemed almost alive, swirling and shifting as if it had a mind of its own, concealing and revealing the city's secrets at will. Gargoyles perched atop ancient buildings leered down at the inhabitants, their stone faces contorted into grotesque expressions. These silent sentinels had witnessed the rise and fall of countless souls, their eyes forever watching, forever judging. The city's heart beat with a rhythm of its own, a symphony of sirens and distant cries, punctuated by the rhythmic clatter of trams on rain-slicked tracks. It was a cacophony that spoke of life, struggle, and the relentless march of time. Neon signs, their colors bleeding into the mist, cast an eerie glow on the deserted streets below. The lights flickered like beacons in the darkness, guiding lost souls through the maze of the city. An unsettling silence lingered in the air, broken only by the whispering wind that carried with it the scent of decay and the promise of rain. It was a silence that spoke of forgotten dreams and unfulfilled promises. It was a city that had witnessed countless stories unfold, some whispered in hushed tones, others forever lost to the shadows. Each alleyway and hidden corner held a piece of the city's soul, a fragment of its dark history. A city where darkness reigned supreme and where fate, it seemed, had a way of playing cruel tricks on its inhabitants. In this place, hope was a fleeting illusion, and survival was the only constant. And Elias moved through the city's underbelly like a phantom. A man of few words, his reputation preceded him. He was known only as the Shadow, a fitting moniker for someone who existed solely in the periphery, a whisper in the darkness. He was a ghost, a spectre, a figment of imagination. Elias was a master of his craft. He moved with a lethal grace, his movements precise, calculated, devoid of emotion. He was an instrument of fate, a bringer of death, his very presence an omen of impending doom. He had no past, no future, only the present moment, the job at hand. He was a void, a blank slate, a vessel to carry out the will of others. He was the embodiment of death itself. The instructions were precise, delivered with chilling indifference. A name, a place, a time. The details were irrelevant, mere variables in an equation he knew all too well. Claudia Rohan, journalist, a thorn in the side of someone powerful. Elias accepted the assignment with his usual stoicism, his face betraying no emotion. He was a professional, and sentimentality had no place in his line of work. He was a weapon, a tool, and like any tool, he was to be used and then discarded. He studied the photograph, memorizing her features. Her eyes, a piercing blue, held a hint of defiance, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. It was a look that both intrigued and disturbed him. Claudia Rohan lived for the truth. Her pen was her sword, her words her weapons. She was fearless, relentless in her pursuit of justice, exposing corruption and deceit wherever she found it. Her articles, published in one of the city's leading newspapers, were a beacon of hope in a city shrouded in darkness. She had made enemies, powerful men who operated in the shadows, their wealth and influence shielding them from scrutiny. But Claudia had a knack for uncovering their secrets, shining a light on their illicit dealings. She was a threat, a danger to their carefully constructed empires. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who refused to be silenced. She was a thorn in their side, and they wanted her silenced permanently. The air crackled with tension. Elias watched from the shadows as Claudia Rohan walked briskly down the rain-slicked street, her face illuminated by the harsh glare of a street lamp. Her red coat, a splash of color in the monochrome cityscape, stood out like a beacon in the night. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment. Time seemed to stand still. Elias, the seasoned assassin, felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a tremor that ran through his being. Her gaze held his, a curious mix of apprehension and defiance in her eyes. He had seen fear in the eyes of his victims countless times before, but this was different. This was something else. He couldn't explain it, but he felt strangely drawn to her. Section 6. The crack in the facade. Elias, for the first time in his career, hesitated. The weight of his mission bore down on him, but something was different this time. He, the emotionless executioner, felt a stirring within him, a sense of unease he couldn't shake. And his hands, usually steady, now trembled slightly. Claudia Rohan, the woman he was supposed to eliminate, had awakened something within him, something he thought long buried. Her presence was unsettling. Her unwavering gaze, the way she held herself, the fire in her eyes, it all spoke to him on a level he didn't understand. It was as if she saw right through him. He felt a strange sense of kinship with her, a connection that transcended the grim task at hand. It was a bond forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. He, the bringer of death, felt strangely protective of this woman. It was a feeling that conflicted with his very nature. He pushed the thought away, trying to regain his composure. This was madness. He couldn't afford to be distracted, not now. He was a professional, and he had a job to do. But the crack in his facade had been exposed, and he wasn't sure if he could ever seal it again. Section 7. Echoes of doubt. Doubt, a feeling alien to Elias, crept into his mind like a venomous serpent, whispering insidious thoughts, questioning his every move. He who had never faltered now found himself grappling with a moral dilemma he had never anticipated. The city, once his hunting ground, now felt suffocating, closing in on him, mirroring his own internal turmoil. The rain, relentless in its downpour, seemed to mock his confusion, washing away the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. He had always prided himself on his ability to remain detached, to view his targets as mere obstacles to be overcome. But Claudia Rohan was different. She was not just a name on a list. She was a living, breathing human being. Section 8. A decision made. The moment of truth arrived. Elias, his finger on the trigger, watched as Claudia Rohan disappeared into the crowded cafe, her red coat a fleeting splash of color in the sea of grey. The bustling cafe was a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. Every fiber of his being screamed for resolution, for an end to the chaos that had consumed his life. He could end it all with a single pull of the trigger. It would be quick, painless. The weight of the gun felt like the weight of his past, heavy and unyielding. The cold metal was a reminder of the countless decisions that had led him to this point, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. He lowered the gun, his hand trembling slightly. The decision was not just about Claudia, it was about him, about who he had become and who he wanted to be. The trembling in his hand was not just fear, but a release of the tension that had gripped him for so long. He had made his decision. He would not be the instrument of her destruction. The resolve in his eyes was clear. He was no longer a puppet to his past, but a man with a choice. The relief that washed over him was palpable. A weight lifted from his shoulders. He would not be the one to extinguish the light that shone so brightly within her. Claudia represented hope, a beacon in the darkness that had enveloped his life. Her light was something he could not bring himself to snuff out. He had chosen a different path, a path fraught with uncertainty and danger. The road ahead was not clear, but it was his own. The crossroads he stood at symbolized the choices that lay before him, each path leading to an unknown future. He had chosen to defy his destiny, to embrace the unknown. The darkness was no longer something to fear, but something to conquer. He was ready to face whatever came next with a newfound sense of purpose. He was no longer the shadow, the ghost in the machine. He was breaking free from the chains that had bound him, stepping into the light of his own making. The transformation was not just physical, but deeply emotional. He was Elias, and he had made a choice to live, to fight, and to find his own path. The city around him was the same, but he was different. He was no longer a man defined by his past, but one who had taken control of his future. Section 9. Into the Abyss. With a newfound sense of purpose, Elias melted back into the labyrinthine alleys, leaving behind the life he once knew. The rain, as if in approval, had stopped, and a sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating his path. He didn't look back. He knew his actions would have consequences, that his defiance would not go unpunished, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. He had made his choice, and he would live with it, no matter the cost. The city, now bathed in an eerie silence, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm that was sure to come. And in the heart of that silence, a single thought echoed. What had he done?